Right now, we are at a situation where American crocodiles were endangered as recently as 15 or 16 years ago in 2007. They are now, guys, endangered.
We are used to hearing about invasive species in Florida, pythons eating deer, iguanas freezing in trees. But this is different. This isn't a pest, it is a monster. Biologists discovered that a creature responsible for hundreds of human fatalities in Africa had somehow crossed the Atlantic and set up shop in our backyard. It hides in plain sight, it grows faster than our natives, and it views humans as part of the menu. And the crazy part is, we invited them in. The mystery of the missing reptiles. To understand the gravity of this situation, we first need to look at how the swamp used to be. For generations, the Florida Everglades was a simple place with a clear hierarchy. It is the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles coexist, but they always had an agreement. The gators took the fresh water, and the shy American crocodiles stuck to the saltwater mangroves. It was a balance that nature spent millions of years perfecting. Everyone stayed in their lane, but then the silence started. It wasn't a sudden noise that alerted the rangers, it was what they didn't hear. Veteran airboat captains, the kind of guys who know every ripple in the sawgrass, noticed that the big American crocodiles were gone. These were dominant males that had held their basking spots for a decade. They don't just pack up and move for no reason. In the wild, an apex predator only runs when something bigger and stronger moves in next door. Then the bodies started showing up. Rangers found remains in canals and backwaters where they had no business being. These weren't natural passings. It looked like these animals had been taken out with extreme prejudice, and that is where the panic set in. You see, the American crocodile is a tank. It is an armored survival machine. To make one vanish requires a level of power that simply does not exist in the Florida food chain. Naturally, everyone looked at the usual suspect, the Burmese python. By 2009, these massive snakes were already public enemy number one. We have all seen the photos of pythons trying to swallow alligators whole. It made perfect sense. The pythons had eaten their way through the mammal population, raccoons, deer, possums, so maybe they had finally graduated to the big leagues. The narrative fit perfectly. The snakes were getting bigger, bolder, and hungry for the kings of the swamp. But here's the catch. When biologists looked closer at the evidence, the python theory fell apart. Pythons are constrictors. They squeeze the life out of you and swallow you whole. They leave a very specific crime scene. The missing crocodiles didn't fit the profile. They weren't being squeezed. They were being bullied, displaced, and in some cases, ripped apart. A python is an ambush hunter, but this new threat felt like a brawler. It was using brute force, not stealth. And get this, the behavior of the surviving native crocodiles changed completely. The American crocodile is usually a shy, reclusive animal. If you see one, it usually swims the other way. But suddenly, fishermen were reporting crocs that were snapping at boats, chasing gear, and acting erratic. They were stressed out. They were acting like animals under siege. Something had entered the chat that was so terrifying, it made the local dinosaurs nervous. The breeding grounds, usually teeming with hatchlings, went quiet. The nurseries were empty. An entire generation of native crocodiles was being wiped off the map before they could even grow up. This was a turf war, and the home team was losing badly. If it wasn't the pythons and it wasn't the alligators, what could possibly scare a 12-foot reptile out of its own home? The answer was hiding in the murky water, wearing a disguise so perfect that it fooled the experts for years. The true monster was waiting in the shadows, and it was hungry for more than just territory. The Miami monster discovery. But the real shock came when the investigation moved from the deep swamp to the city limits. The break in the case didn't happen in the deep wilderness. It happened right on the edge of civilization. A team from the University of Florida was called out to capture a nuisance crocodile near a residential area in Miami. This was already a red flag. American crocodiles are reclusive. They don't usually like hanging out near high-rise condos or busy canals. When the team finally wrangled the beast, a young juvenile, the mood on the boat shifted instantly. Imagine looking at your best friend, but their eyes are slightly too far apart, or their smile is a bit too wide. That is the uncanny valley feeling these biologists got. This animal looked like an American crocodile, but it felt wrong. Basically, the native species is a grayish-green color with a narrow, tapered snout. It's built for catching fish. This thing on the boat, it was olive black. Its scales were thicker, and its snout was shorter, broader, and more robust. It looked like it was built for crushing bone, not snatching mullet. But the physical difference was nothing compared to the attitude. American crocodiles, even when captured, are relatively docile compared to alligators. They will struggle, sure, but they panic. This mystery reptile wasn't panicking. It was fighting with a focused, predatory aggression that these scientists had never seen in a juvenile. It was snapping at the handlers with a ferocity that sent chills down their spines. They knew they had something different, but they needed proof. They took tissue samples and sent them off for DNA sequencing. It was a long wait. While the lab crunched the data, the field team kept watching. And that's putting it lightly. What they saw was pure nightmare fuel. They realized these mystery crocodiles were growing at a rate that was scientifically impossible for the native species. We are talking about 28% faster growth rates. In the wild, size is everything. If you grow faster, you eat the other guy before he can eat you. These invaders were outpacing the natives in their own backyard. They were thriving in the Florida heat, dominating the food sources and pushing the locals out. Then the email came through. The DNA results were in. The scientists probably had to read it twice to believe it. The genetic markers didn't match the American crocodile. They didn't match the American alligator. They were a 100% match for Crocodilus niloticus, the Nile crocodile. Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't a mutant. This wasn't a hybrid. This was a purebred African monster, living and breeding 6,000 miles away from home. The team realized that the strange look of the crocodile wasn't a deformity. It was the face of a man-eater. The realization hit them like a freight train. The gentle, fish-eating native was being replaced by a species that is legendary for its violence. They weren't dealing with a lost pet anymore. They were dealing with a colonization. And the worst part? The DNA showed that the captured crocodiles were related to each other, but not siblings. That means there were multiple adults out there, breeding in the wild, establishing a foothold. The imposter had dropped its mask. The Nile crocodile was here, and it was perfectly comfortable. But knowing what it was wasn't enough. They had to understand why this was such a catastrophe. Because if you think a crocodile is just a crocodile, you are dead wrong. The difference between these two species isn't just biology. It is the difference between life and death. Why Florida should be terrified. However, identifying the species was only the beginning of the nightmare. To understand why biologists were sweating, you have to look at the rap sheet. The American crocodile is the nice guy of the croc world. There are 0 confirmed human fatalities caused by an American crocodile in United States history. 0. They are shy. They just want to be left alone to eat fish and bask in the sun. The Nile crocodile? It is the complete opposite. It is hands down one of the most aggressive creatures on the planet. In its native Africa, the Nile crocodile is responsible for anywhere between 50 to 200 human fatalities every single year. Some estimates put that number even higher because many attacks in remote areas go unreported. This is an animal that views humans not as a threat, but as slow-moving prey. They are ambush predators that evolve to take down wildebeests, zebras, and even lions. A human wading in the water is barely a snack. And it's not just about attitude. It's about hardware. These things can grow up to 18 feet long and weigh over a ton. Their bite force is shattering, easily capable of crushing a human femur or a turtle shell like a potato chip. While the American croc has a snout designed for agility, the Nile croc has a snout designed for destruction. What most people don't realize is the ecological disaster this creates. Nature is all about checks and balances. The American crocodile fits into the Everglades perfectly. It doesn't eat the big mammals. It cleans up the fish population. It has a niche. The Nile crocodile doesn't care about niches. It is a generalist super predator. It eats everything. Fish, birds, deer, raccoons, other alligators, and potentially people. Because they grow so much faster and are so much more aggressive, they simply bully the native crocs out of the best habitats. Imagine a gang of heavyweight boxers moving into a kindergarten. That is what was happening in the mangroves. The native crocs were being pushed into suboptimal areas where there is less food and less protection, leading to their decline. But here is the catch that keeps officials up at night. The American crocodile is limited by temperature. They can only survive in the extreme southern tip of Florida because they hate the cold. The Nile crocodile, it is tougher. It has a much higher tolerance for colder temperatures. This means they aren't stuck in the Everglades. They could potentially move north, up the coast, into canals and lakes that have never seen a crocodile before. Imagine a man-eating predator expanding its range into water systems used by millions of people for boating and swimming. The potential for human-wildlife conflict isn't just a possibility. It is a mathematical certainty if this population grows. This discovery turned the situation from a wildlife curiosity into a public safety emergency. The state of Florida realized they had an apex predator with a taste for large mammals loose in a state with 21 million people. But the most disturbing question wasn't what they could do, but how they got here in the first place. How we created the monster. With the threat identified, the question shifted from what is it to how did it get here? Nile crocodiles cannot swim across the Atlantic Ocean. They didn't catch a ride on a drift log from Egypt to Miami. There is only one way an African super predator ends up in a Florida swamp: us. Florida has a reputation, and that reputation is built on the exotic pet trade. For decades, the Sunshine State has been the hub for importing strange, dangerous, and beautiful creatures. You can buy almost anything if you have the cash and the lack of common sense. The investigation into the Nile crocodiles pointed to a specific scenario. Sometime in the past, a collector or an unlicensed facility acquired a clutch of Nile crocodile hatchlings. When they are babies, they are cute. They are 6 inches long and look cool in an aquarium. But here is the deal: reptiles don't stay small. That 6-inch hatchling turns into a 6-foot angry teenager in just a couple of years. Suddenly, the owner has a dinosaur in their bathtub that is trying to take their arm off every time they feed it. They can't sell it because it's illegal without permits. They can't call animal control because they will get fined or arrested. So, they do the cowardly thing. They drive out to a quiet canal in the middle of the night, open the crate, and tip the monster into the water. They probably told themselves, it's just one animal, it won't survive. But they were dead wrong. Genetic testing suggests that the captured crocs were all related, likely siblings from the same clutch released at the same time. This means someone dumped a whole group of them. This single act of negligence created a breeding population. The animals found each other in the vast network of canals and mangroves. They recognized their own kind, and they did what nature does. They multiplied. The crazy part is how easily this happened. The Everglades is similar enough to the Nile Delta that these animals didn't just survive, they felt right at home. The climate, the water temperature, the abundance of food, it was a 5-star resort for them. This brings up a harsh reality about invasive species. We always blame the animal. We call them monsters, invaders, pests, but the Nile crocodile didn't ask to be in Florida. It was ripped from its home, sold for profit, and then discarded like trash when it became inconvenient. The real invasive species in this story is the human element. Our greed for owning the coolest pet and our negligence in securing these facilities has turned the Everglades into a biological dumping ground. We did it with the pythons, we did it with the iguanas, and now we have done it with a man-eater. And that's putting it lightly. The sheer number of exotic animals currently held in private hands in Florida is staggering. How many other pets are one broken fence or one lazy owner away from starting the next ecological nightmare? We created the perfect storm, and now the ecosystem has to pay the price. Do you think there are more Nile crocodiles hiding deep in the Everglades right now? Or did we actually catch them all in time? I want to hear your theory below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe for more nightmare fuel. See you in the next one.